Jonathan Ronald Reuel Tolkien wrote The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, among other things. His family moved from England to South Africa when he was, where he was born in 1892. His mother and the sons, his brothers and him, moved back to England when J.R.R. was only 3, and his father died unexpectedly of a brain hemorrhage in 1896. While he was a toddler in Africa, J.R.R. was bitten by a large African spider while he was playing in the garden. He doesn't remember much of it, obviously, because he was so young, but he does remember the pain and a lot of screaming. It's thought that the large man-eating spiders that we see in Mirkwood Forest and Shelob in Lord of the Rings was inspired by this traumatic event. Back in England, J.R.R. began to grow, and it was actually found that he was very gifted. He was a gifted child. He had a high intelligence, and he could learn how to read and write very quickly. By the age of 4, he began to learn foreign languages at the age of 4. Greek, Latin, Spanish, Old Norse, and Gothic. As a preteen, he mastered these foreign languages, and he became bored. So he began making up his own language, which became Elvish in The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit. His mother died of diabetes when he was 12. So at the age of 12, both his father and mother had passed. When J.R.R. was in his early 20s, he married, and then he served in the British military for World War I. J.R.R. found himself in the Battle of Somme. Well, this is one of the bloodiest battles on the Western Front. It lasted for 4 months. J.R.R. did not get injured, but he did come down with something called trench fever. It was something that you got if you were bit by lice that had this disease in them. He was removed from battle, and all but only one of his closest friends died of active duty there in World War I. The act of fighting, the loss of his friends, the horrors of war is thought to have also inspired him to write about Middle-earth wars that we see in The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit. After the war, J.R.R. became a professor at Oxford University, where he befriended C.S. Lewis. Who can tell me what C.S. Lewis wrote? Does anyone know? Any guesses? It's similar to Lord of the Rings. JJ?
The Hobbit.
No, that's what J.R.R. wrote. That's Tolkien.
Harry Potter?
No, but you're in the right neighborhood.
What's the dude that has the bow and arrow?
Arrow?
Well, there is bows and arrows in this story too. I'm not sure. You mean, Robin Hood?
Yeah.
No, not Robin Hood, but it's a good guess.
Lord of the Rings?
No, that's J.R.R. That's Tolkien. Chronicles of Narnia. You ever seen that or whatever? That's C.S. Lewis. C.S. Lewis. Never seen it? So he befriended at Oxford C.S. Lewis, who went on to write the Chronicles of Narnia, which is interesting. They're very similar, Lord of the Rings and C.S. Lewis's Chronicles of Narnia. You may have seen the movies. I think they have The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe for C.S. Lewis. They have the ship one, and maybe one other one. I can't remember. No, that's different. But today, The Hobbit has sold over 100 million copies. It's been translated into 50 different languages, making it the 8th bestseller of all time. Kind of funny, C.S. Lewis's The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe is the 9th bestseller of all time, which is kind of funny. I think it's kind of funny, with 85 million copies. He wrote The Hobbit in 1937. What he was doing, it was a hot summer day. It was actually 1929. He was a professor there at Oxford, and he was grading papers, which he called soul-killing work. He hated it. It was summertime. He was disgusted with doing his grading the papers, and he took a paper that he was grading. He kind of flicked it off the desk, and there was a blank piece of paper on his desk, and he wrote these words: "In a hole in the ground, there lived a hobbit." What's funny about that is he didn't know what a hobbit was yet. And that's how Tolkien wrote. Oftentimes he would just introduce something, like some sort of elf or some sort of dragon or a hobbit or a dwarf or something like that. And he didn't really know what was going to happen yet or how to describe them, but he would name it first, and then he would start to develop the character first. Usually it goes the other way around. Usually you develop the storyline, the setting, that sort of thing, and then you interject a character. He did it the other way. He started character first, which may be a testament to why his characters in The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit are so memorable, because he started with the character, not the setting, which is kind of interesting. So he wrote, "In a hole in the ground there lived a hobbit." And then he started to dive into this world of Middle-earth, of The Hobbit, Lord of the Rings, that sort of thing. 1937, The Hobbit was published, and it was immediately a hit. And as I said, now it has sold over 100 million copies. Then in the 50s, in 1954 or 55, he wrote and published, or began to write and publish, The Lord of the Rings. He first started with The Fellowship of the Ring, then The Two Towers, and then, does anyone know what the last Lord of the Rings is called? Does anyone know? The third book and movie? There was Fellowship of the Ring, Two Towers, and then the... No. Did someone say it? I couldn't.
Sonic.
No. Return of...
Zelda.
Return of the King. Return of the King. Oh, close. Yeah, close.
I was close.
You're probably the closest, Tyler. It took Tolkien over 10 years to write all three books of the Lord of the Rings, starting with The Fellowship. It was really funny. So in the 50s, he did have a telephone in his house, which telephones weren't very common yet. But people would read The Fellowship, and then I don't know how they got his number or whatever, but people would read The Fellowship, and then they'd call his house and be like, "What happens to Frodo? What happens to this?" And he's like, "I haven't written it yet." And they, "Oh." So it took him over 10 years to write the three books of The Lord of the Rings, and like The Hobbit, it was very popular as it was being released. Then, it wasn't until 2001 that director Peter Jackson released the first of the three Lord of the Rings movies. 2001 is when The Fellowship of the Ring came out in the movie theaters. And then it wasn't until 2012 when The Hobbit came out, the trilogy of The Hobbit. In total, The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit have earned $6 billion. That's movies only. That's the movies. Lord of the Rings is the most awarded film trilogy of all time. 3 movies. So like if you have like...
In a row.
Yep. So it beat out like the Harry Potters, it beat out C.S. Lewis's stuff, even Star Wars, it beat all those out as far as the most awarded trilogy. It earned 37 Oscar nominations with 17 Oscar wins. That's crazy for a trilogy.
You know what movie is still better?
What movie's still better?
Cars.
Hey, I think my son might agree with you.
No, plane.
That is the largest Oscar sweep in movie history, The Lord of the Rings. Now, as far as what The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings are, I'm just going to kind of give you a little bit of what the story is. Obviously, it's way too much to tell you all right now, but I just kind of want to give you a little bit of what the story's about. Who's never seen the movies in here? Who's never seen them? About half of you have never seen them. You know what they are, though. I mean,
thought
yeah.
2 out of the 3.
2 out of the 3, so you don't know how it ends? Yeah.
I don't want to know how it ends.
Oh, okay. All right. So the story kind of goes like this. A hobbit named Bilbo Baggins. They're basically a race of like little people, the hobbits are. They live in villages. They're isolated from the rest of the world. The hobbits, they are happy to let the world just go on without them. They would rather not really get involved with what's going on in the outside world. They don't get involved with wars. They don't get involved with politics, that sort of thing. The affairs of the big people, that's for them. They don't like to get involved. They don't really care what's going on. Well then, as Bilbo Baggins is just living his life there in Hobbiton, in the Shire is what it's called, enters a wizard. And he basically sparks a fire in Bilbo and invites him to come on this adventure with him into the wild. He wants Bilbo to help this band of wandering dwarves to reclaim gold from a mountain that was stolen from them by a dragon. Does anyone know what the dragon's name is? Smaug, very good. Yep. He was a... This is how nerdy I am. His species was a fire drake from the north. That's what he was. There's lots of dragons, but that's just what he was. I'm a nerd, man. I'm sorry. I'm a nerd. I am. So now Bilbo, through his imagination, and oftentimes he's sitting there in his home before the wizard came, who was Gandalf, if you didn't know that. he often thought about the outside. He would think about it. He would actually write about it, that sort of thing. He would even look at maps. He'd kind of pore over maps. So it's almost like Gandalf kind of knew that he was somewhat interested in the outside world, and that's why he sparked him to come with him. Yes, sir?
What's Smeagol's race?
He was a hobbit originally. Yeah, he was a hobbit originally. Yeah, he was a hobbit originally. And then the ring corrupted him for over 500 years, so that's how he became that creature. Yeah. Does anyone know what his original name was? Gollum's name? You know what his name was? Do you know what his name was?
No, I know.
I was just gonna say I don't know. I forget his name, but I know that he killed his cousin just to get the ring.
Right. Yeah, cousin or friend or something like that. Yeah, it could have been. Right. And which was part of the ring corrupting him. Yeah. His name was Smeagol.
Oh,
Was his name?
Smeagol.
I said Smeagol.
Did you really?
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't hear you.
Smeagol.
Oh, I didn't hear you. I'm sorry.
He did.
So Bilbo, he enters this band of dwarves and a wizard to go on this adventure. They seek to get the dragon, either kill the dragon or at least get him out of Erebor, is what it's called, the mountain, the kingdom. They do not successfully kill the dragon. They actually just make him mad, and the dragon leaves, called Erebor. He leaves the lonely mountain, and he actually takes his aggression out on a town that was built on the lake. There's a lake down below, and it's literally built on the lake. Does anyone guess what the town's name was? Lake Town. That's really what it was named. So, okay, here's the funny thing about Tolkien. I think it's hilarious. So Tolkien, he's a master of languages, right? Like when he's a kid, he knows all these languages. By the time he's like a preteen, he knows Greek and Old Norse and all these. So then he started to invent his own language, right? The Elvish language. So there's names like Erebor, what's some other names of places? Lothlorien, things like that. And then he calls like the most important mountain in his series, Mount Doom, which I think is kind of dumb. I don't know, it's just he has all these fancy names for all these things, and then the most important mountain is just like Mount Doom.
Well, it's also called Mordor, so like it's kind of like.
Well, Mordor, that's the region,
Mordor,
yeah, but then the mountain is just Mount Doom, which I thought was kind of cheesy. But whatever, I didn't write it, and I didn't sell 100 million copies, so what opinion should I have? All right, let's see here. So the wizard invites him out to this adventure. They go out, and they basically succeed, sort of. They do reclaim the mountain, that sort of thing. But then there's also a battle. It's called the Battle of the Five Armies. And all these other races, elves, men, dwarves, they want to take claim of the gold that's in the mountain. And the Battle of the Five Armies happens, and like half the dwarves are wiped out. Bilbo survives, but most of his friends do die at that battle, at the end of what's called the Battle of the Five Armies in the Hobbit. Then you fast forward 60 years. That's where the Lord of the Rings picks up. Bilbo's still alive. He's in the Shire, and he has this nephew. His name is what? Frodo. And so he passes on the ring and all of his belongings to Frodo. Well, all of a sudden, because the bad guy, what's the bad guy's name? The big bad guy? Sauron. He wants the ring back. And it's kind of a long story, but this ring gives him power. This ring gives him his physical body back, because right now doesn't have his physical body, and so he needs this ring back. And the ring kind of is sentient. It kind of has a will, and it's beckoning to go back to its master. And of course, now again, the wizard Gandalf and the other good guys, they don't want that to happen, obviously. So the Hobbit, Frodo, they go on this adventure to not reclaim gold, but to destroy the ring. And you can't just destroy the ring by, chopping it in half or melting it in a fire. It has to be put back into Mount Doom where it was forged, and only that fire can melt it. So that's what they have to do. So they basically have to take it home to destroy it, which is kind of crazy to think about. But that is the story of the Lord of the Rings, which is super cool. I would recommend that you watch it. If you haven't, I highly recommend it. I read the Lord of the Rings to my kids, and I read The Hobbit to my kids twice, so they're pretty familiar with the story.
So they would win for sure.
What's that?
So they would win pay attention for us for sure.
Probably. My daughter probably more than my son, but my son loves it too, but my daughter really likes it. I'm not going to tell you how nerdy we are, but we're
Pretty nerdy.
thinking about getting matching Lord of the Rings tattoos. But I didn't say that out loud.
It's really good.
Okay, you ready? Life lessons from The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings. You ready? If you're taking notes, this is when you want to start taking notes. Or do ya?
Or you want to take notes? Say yourself.
Life lessons from The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings. Number 1. True bravery is not the absence of fear. It's not being afraid, but choosing to do what is right in spite of your fear. True bravery is not just not being afraid. That's not being brave. True bravery is doing what you know you need to do, is doing what's good, is doing that hard thing, whatever it is, even when you're afraid. That's what true bravery is. And we actually see this throughout The Hobbit. We see this throughout the Lord of the Rings. It's kind of a repeating theme that you see, because these are not like superheroes. These are just, they're different races, but they're just normal people. And they have to do these great things, which is pretty wild to think about. So if you're afraid of something, you recognize its potential to do you harm, right? So if there's something that you're afraid of, you recognize that this thing can do harm to you in some way. A bear out in the woods can do you harm. A bully could do you harm. A teacher has authority, could do you harm, or at least your grade, right? A judge, a PO, they have the ability to do something towards you. They have potential to enter into your life. Therefore, you should, what's 2 words that are synonymous, or 1 word that's synonymous with fear? Fear or?
Scared.
No? Starts with the R?
Respect.
Respect. Very good. Thank you, Edward. So those 2 words oftentimes can be interchangeable. Fear and respect. If you don't respect the bear in the woods, what could happen to you with that bear?
The bear will
The bear's going to tear you up.
It's gonna take you.
If you don't respect the authority of a judge, what could happen? that judge could tear you up, right? Could tear you up. So to fear something simply means you respect its potential to impact your life. This is a good way to say it. They can be used interchangeably. The same thing is true if you remember, well, it was 2 weeks ago now. Remember the tick-tock of the crocodile? What did Captain Hook do with that crocodile? He was what?
Afraid.
He was afraid of it because he saw it as his pending what, Junior? Death. Very good.
Or doom.
There are many times in your life, there's many times in my life where we're going to have to push forward, where we're going to have to keep going, we're going to have to keep taking one step after another, even when we're afraid, even when we're terrified. We still have to move forward. Now, I'm not saying we blunder into every situation. I'm not saying we don't have a healthy fear of what is in the world. We should. We should never ignore potential dangers or consequences. Of course, that's not what I'm saying. But if you want to be a mature man, if you want to be a strong man, if you want to be a successful man in life, you're going to have to move forward even when you're afraid. Even when you're afraid. Good men face their fears for the good of themselves and those around them. That's what good men do. So number 1, the first lesson is true bravery is not the absence of fear, but is choosing to do what is right in spite of your fear. Lesson number 2. Sometimes to simply keep going is your greatest victory.
Amen.
It might not be the finish line, it might not be the trophy, it might not be the graduation, it might not be the certificate, because there's a lot of keep goings before you hit that mark, is there not? There's a lot of steps you have to, from now to what you want to accomplish, there's a lot of steps in between there, and sometimes your greatest victory is simply to keep going. In The Hobbit, you see it in the movie. It's pretty good in the movie. They did a good job with it. I was really happy they did so good with it, because in the book, it's a big deal. In the story of The Hobbit, there's a moment when Bilbo is walking down this long, dark tunnel. He's at Erebor. He's at where the dragon is. They have not gotten the dragon out yet. And he by himself is walking down this dark, long tunnel. And he can feel the heat from the dragon on the other side. The dwarves are that way. The dragon's that way. And there's a moment where he stops. And I want to read this little excerpt. This is right from the book, from the Hobbit. I want to read this to you. It says this: "It was at this point Bilbo stopped. Going on from there was the bravest thing he ever did. The tremendous things that happened afterward were as nothing compared to it. He fought the real battle in the tunnel alone, before he had ever even seen the vast danger that lay in wait." Sometimes we find ourselves in very dark, scary tunnels. And oftentimes in those tunnels we are what? All alone. So we have three options. We can go back, we can freeze and just stay there, or what is the third option?
Fight.
We can go forward. Or we
Fight
can
or
go
flight.
forward. Sometimes we find ourselves in very scary tunnels. We don't know what the dangers are ahead. We may have an idea, but we don't really know. We don't really know. We may think we can feel it, we can sense it, we can smell it, we can hear it, but until we're actually there, we really don't know. You can either give up, you can freeze, or you can go forward. And sometimes, like Bilbo in this scary tunnel, the greatest victory is simply to take another step. He didn't know exactly what he was going to find. He didn't know if he was going to even survive the day. But he decided to keep moving forward. I think maybe that's where some of you are here at Pineview. It may feel like with probation and being at Pineview and maybe home stuff and maybe your levels or maybe just frustrations or school or whatever, it may feel like you're stuck in a tunnel. I tell you what, the best thing you can do is just keep moving forward. Sometimes it's little by little, and sometimes it's 2 steps forward and 1 step back. I tell you what, there's been so many things in my life where I was moving forward, and things would get in my way. Things would get in my way, things would delay me, things would stop me. And sometimes it felt like I was beaten back and like, oh geez, I'm already to the beginning again. I just keep moving, I just keep moving. And eventually, if you keep moving forward, what will you eventually do?
Overcome.
You'll get there. You will overcome the thing. Sometimes it takes longer than you want. Who was battling Bilbo in that tunnel?
Himself.
That was
Fear.
it. It was just himself. There wasn't orcs, there wasn't goblins, there wasn't a dragon yet. It was just himself. And that is our biggest adversary, is ourselves. So often, because we can succumb, like you were saying, Tyler, we can succumb to that fear and frustration and disappointment. It happens. Believe me, I know, and all the staff in here know. Why do you think we do what we do? We know. So number 2 is sometimes simply moving forward is your greatest victory. Number 3. I wish this one wasn't true, to be honest. I really don't. I wish this was not true, but it is. Number 3 is this: the greatest stories always have the greatest hardships. It's just what it is. The greatest stories always have the greatest hardships. I want to say this to you, and maybe you don't realize this, and maybe you just need to hear this. Maybe someone needs to hear this. Hardships, maybe it's family stuff, maybe it's Pineview stuff. Hardships do not always mean you're on the wrong path. Sometimes we think, well, if it's hard, then it must be wrong. No, oftentimes hardships are actually pushing you towards the right direction. So a hardship does not always mean you're on the wrong path. Many times there is easier paths. There's easier paths, but oftentimes those easier paths are also emptier. Now, at the same time, I would say this: we should never go looking for trouble. I taught my son that when he was in school. Son, do not go looking for trouble. But if trouble comes your way, handle it. Do not go looking for trouble. So we should never go looking for trouble, but we should not shy away from difficulties either when they come our way, when they come into our tunnel, when they face us head on. Don't run. There are many hardships that can be avoided. I'm going to give you a little list of them here. These are some hardships that can be avoided. Self-inflicted wounds. Now, physically, emotionally, relationally. Self-inflicted wounds can be avoided and should be avoided. Not learning from others' mistakes. If you see someone messing up, get away from them. Don't follow them. Not learning from others' mistakes. Being careless, short-sighted, or reckless. That is something you can avoid. Then also listening to poor influences. Watch your inner circles. Watch who you hang out with. Watch who you listen to. Listening to poor influences can definitely harm you and should be avoided. But there are some hardships that are just unavoidable. It's just what it is. If you want to be successful at Pineview, with your family, life in general, if you want to be successful, you're going to have to own up and you're going to have to face those hardships, whether you like it or not. And like the example of Bilbo in the tunnel, your biggest adversary is yourself, 100%. When I was building my house in Alaska, I knew there was going to be hardships. There were times where I'd be in my living room of the house that we were renting while I was building it, and I'd be looking out the window like this, just looking out the window, because it was 20 below zero and snowing. And what did I have to go do?
Build a house.
I had to go swing a hammer. No, thank you. I'm standing there. I'm just like, this snow. I'm doing. What am I? Why am I doing this? What am I? But I was looking at what I could accomplish, and there was a lot of nails to be hammered. There was a lot of boards to be in between starting to where I moved in. So if I'm going to be successful, I have to. I look out that window. I have to say, all right. I go put my gear on, I go put my boots on, I start my big diesel truck, and away I go. Day after day after day. Golly, I don't want to do that again. Yes, sir.
I actually seen a picture of you up in Alaska.
Oh, really? Yeah. Yeah.
I'll let you really
Yep.
have a house in Alaska. No, not
Let's see here. So let me say this and I'll be done. I'll say this. If you want, the lesson again, number 3 was this. The greatest stories always have the greatest hardships. If you want your life story to be great, you will have to be willing to go through the hardships that greatness requires. Let me say that again. If you want your life story to be great, you will have to be willing to go through the hardships that greatness requires. There's no way around it. There's no easy to success. There's no easy to greatness. It doesn't work that way. You'll have to get used to doing the right thing, doing good things when it's not convenient, when it's not easy, and when things are difficult. That's just the way success is. Now, you don't have to be successful. You don't have to be. There's lots of people who are not. I know lots of people who are not. I know lots of people who have the potential to be successful. And because they're unwilling to face those hardships, they say, no, I don't like this. I don't like the danger in this tunnel. I'm afraid, so I'm going to what?
Flight.
I'm going back. I'm going to walk away. I'm out. There's so many people that I see have great potential and they say no because they succumb to fear. And you don't have to be one of them. I don't care what your background is. You don't have to be one of them. Yes, sir.
So I'm not one thing to shoot about how the Hobbit was in the tunnel. I could like not like see the fear, but like feel the fear, and then the like going for like running away. I took that and said fight or flight.
Yeah, fight or flight or freeze. Those are your fight, flight, or freeze. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, very good. Questions, comments, concerns before we do pay attention prizes. Yes, sir.
That's what I'm saying.
That's okay. I'll get it. It's all good.
Oh, 4 seconds, 3 seconds, 2 seconds.
Boom.
Anything else?
Nah.
Okay.